The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Well, I think it's important to differentiate between the idea of hospitality and the idea of entertaining. And entertaining to me is more of the, look what I did. It definitely can be more performative. Hospitality, on the other hand, is always first and foremost a way to love people. And the only difference between hospitality and entertaining for its own sake is just our intent. It's just the intent of our hearts.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Lanier Ivester sees hospitality as a primary way she expresses her creativity. She's also a gifted writer. All of her creative endeavors are shaped by the belief that the most quotidian things are charged with eternal meaning, if only we have eyes to see. Her new book, illustrated by Jennifer Trafton, is Glad and Golden Hours, a companion for Advent and Christmastide. In this episode, Lanier and I talk about the difference between hospitality and entertaining. We discuss ways to make the holidays a season of rest, and Lanier makes the case that matter matters. Lanier Ivester, I'm so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited about Glad and Golden Hours, your new book about Christmas hospitality. You tell me, how do you summarize, when people ask you what your book's about, how do you sum that up?
Yeah. So it's famously hard to describe, I think, but it's essentially, at its heart, it's a story. It's a story of of what it can look like to bring our joys and our sorrows into the circle of the season. Mm-hmm. And it's an invitation to offer up the raw materials of our ordinary lives in response to an incarnational love. And for that reason, it is threaded with recipes and crafts that would I like to think would help readers embody some of the themes of the book.
Okay. Can you give an example of what that means? How does a recipe embody?
Yeah. So one of the main tenets of the book that I really try to get across is the fact that, to put it simply, matter matters. The ordinary materials of our life really, truly are material for practical devotion and worship. And for that reason, it's really more of a shift in mindset than a shift in how we're actually completing the recipes or the crafts. It's more, it's definitely the intention of our hearts that, I'm really wanting to call attention to. So,
I think it was, I know it was Robert Farrar Capon said God was the original materialist.
Yes, I love that. Yeah.
And
I saw this morning, actually, I saw on Instagram, SD Smith had posted a quote from C.S. Lewis. And he was talking about how God uses material things and how he engages with us, in the material of life. And what he said, I think, was God invented eating. Like, he likes matter. He invented it.
yeah. And it's somebody asked me about the connection between the word matter, the noun matter, and the verb it matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out they are connected.
Really?
That it's not a coincidence, that those two words are exactly the same. And it's the idea of something being, if something matters, it is substantive, and that's the connection between those two words. And it feels like an important insight.
Yeah. And simply stated, as the most important things are, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, so you describe Christmas as a place of rest. That is going to come as a surprise to some people. Mm-hmm. Christmas as a restful experience, or even an experience that could be restful.
Yes. Yeah.
Explain yourself.
Well, I will attempt to explain myself. So to begin with, I'd like to go back to the title of the book.
Okay.
Because it embedded in that title is, I believe, an invitation to rest. The name of the book is Glad and Golden Hours, a companion for Advent and Christmastide. And the name of the book comes from a lesser known lyric verse in a very well-known carol. It came upon the midnight clear. And readers will notice that Jennifer Trafton, the illustrator, created a beautiful frontispiece that illuminates this verse. But I'm just going to read it just for context here, and then I'll talk a little more about resting place. But this verse runs, "All ye beneath life's crushing load, whose forms are bending low, who toil along the climbing way with painful steps and slow, look now, for glad and golden hours come swiftly on the wing. Oh, rest beside the weary road and hear the angels sing." And, there is that invitation to rest. And to begin with, I want to invite people into an experience of Christmas where they have permission out of the gate to not do it all, that they don't have to do it all, that they can be selective and intentional. I write a lot about clearing the calendar. That's something I do very practically going into the holiday season. I clear the calendar of anything that can wait until January because it's a busy enough season. And, anything that is going to start pulling me off center or making my heart beat faster or like, wait a minute, why are we doing all this? But that's not making white space just as a void. That's making space for the things that actually matter. And in our church, we're always talking about working from a place of rest. And what we mean by that is that we don't have to do anything to earn or merit God's love and approval. And the work that we do is in response to his love, and it's an overflow of his love. And so I like to bring that idea into my observance of Christmas, and with that permission comes the joy of, I am choosing to do this activity or this party or this recipe or whatever. But it just, it just kind of takes away that sense of desperation that is very common this time of year. And I like to say that Christmas is not a race, and it's also not an emergency. And I think that, people, already social media is just getting flooded with all the things we need to do this, and I do offer a lot of, suggestions for things we can do, but I like to think that the purpose and the intent shifts from an ought to a want to.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you shift from a ought to a want to by clearing the calendar, by, I guess, I love that sentence, Christmas is not an emergency, because it certainly can feel like that.
It can feel like it. It certainly can. Yeah. And, I mentioned like about my heart beating faster. That's kind of like my litmus test. If I start, of course, we feel stress in our bodies. And like, if I start feeling my heart beating fast over my, whatever it is, that is my signal to stop and go, okay, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Where have I lost track? Where have I lost the thread of why we're doing all this?
Yeah. That's not what the holiday is for.
Usually, whatever it is that's making my heart beat faster doesn't need to be done. It can be dropped.
Yeah.
Or the purpose, can be.
Yeah. Well, before we started recording, you mentioned that you're going to have quite a few people for Thanksgiving at your house.
I am. Yes. I love it. I'm so excited.
How do you keep your heart from beating fast when you've got a bunch of people coming?
Well, that I try to be super realistic. And I do, because I've, done this for a number of years, and I know, like, if I don't plan well, if I don't give myself space to plan and prepare for it, I'm not going to enjoy it. And it's going to be the crazy round of painting feverishness rather than the, slow, intentional, meaningful, anticipation, as well as savoring of the actual holiday. So yeah, I do give myself lots of space, and I've cleared as much as I can the week before Thanksgiving, and I do a lot of things in advance as much as I can. I talk about this in the book, like with Christmas, I really do try to, fill up my freezer, with things ahead of time, just, spread it out.
Yeah.
And this is very important. I don't do it all. I have help. I let people bring things.
Yeah.
And that's really important too.
Yeah. And when they offer to clean up, do you say, thank you?
Yes, absolutely.
You don't say, don't worry about it. I'll get it.
No. And I love the fact that when we start cleaning up, that doesn't mean the party's over,
Yeah.
It's just, the next round. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, that's actually a pretty good point, that when you make that part of the activity, the cleaning up, it's not a signal for everybody to go home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Necessarily. I don't know if you have anything to say about this, but it feels like when I'm at a gathering, I'm afraid to move on to the next activity, because that is that feels like an inflection point at which somebody's going to say, you know what, this is a good time for me to leave. And then when one person leaves, other people start leaving. And so I find myself sitting maybe in an uncomfortable chair, knowing that we could have a better time together if we just moved 8 feet this way to where there's some different chairs. But I'm afraid to move for fear that that's going to break up the party. Yeah. You got anything to say about that?
So, yeah, I do. And it is like a spell that you don't want to be broken. And so I think there's a kind of a delicate balance there. And what, the first time that this really, really came to my notice, I hosted a dinner party in my early 20s with a friend who's French. And she and my sister and I, spent 2 days making this meal. And, we had like 10 of our friends, and, all crowded around my parents' dining room table. And her dad had like sent over the wine for this dinner. And but I just noticed, like, we would finish a course and I would start getting restless. Like, well, we need to like bring out the next course. Because people expect, that. And every time I would start to get up and move, my friend Delphine would just kind of lay on the table and like shake her head, like, don't rush this. And, so, the meal went on for 3 hours, and nobody felt that it went on too long, Yeah. And so, I think there is a way, like, as the host or hostess, to say, hey, let's keep this going. Let's move in the den for coffee,
Yeah.
But when it comes to being a guest, I think sometimes you just kind of have to go with the flow.
Yeah, right. Well, I wonder. This is just now occurring to me. Maybe we can say, "Hey, we're going to move to the den for coffee," and you have to sit there for 5 minutes before you can leave.
Right. Sorry, that's the rule.
This is not an inflection point for you to leave. You can leave after 5 minutes, but you have to go sit down with us.
I know. I just feel
that's
like
not
I
good hostery.
keep serving. I'm just like, more wine, more coffee, more. Like,
Yeah, right.
don't go anywhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's talk about hospitality. I mean, because hospitality means a lot of different things. And one thing it can mean is sort of a canvas for showing how accomplished I can be as a host or hostess. Hospitality can be a way of showing off, and of course also hospitality. There's the hospitality industry, which just means hotels and restaurants. But tell me about how you use the word hospitality, how that changes how your use of the word changes the way you think about gathering.
Well, I think it's important to differentiate between the idea of hospitality and the idea of entertaining. And
Okay.
entertaining to me is more of the, look what I did.
Yeah.
It doesn't, I mean, not necessarily, but it definitely can be
Sure.
more performative. Hospitality, on the other hand, is always first and foremost a way to love people. And the only difference between hospitality and entertaining for its own sake is just our intent. It's just the intent of our hearts. And that's something that I have really come to, just really cling to and over the years. And it's something I saw my mother model to her guests, but just the idea that people know, like they know if it's you that they want. Or if it's just the evidence of an event. And my mother was the most hospitable person I have ever known. I mean, my book is dedicated to her. But she never, ever put the act of having people in her house over the people themselves, and, so hospitality, I mean, it comes from the same root word as hospital. It means to care for people. It means to make a place for them. And if that means making a bed for them, if it means setting a place for them at the table, if it means a lavish spread or a humble spread, the semantics don't matter so much as the intention. And, I do believe that even in genuine hospitality, there is, I don't want to say performative, but there is a creative element because it is an art form, and for some people that is a primary expression of creativity, and it is for me. And so I don't know, it's closely linked with that, but anyway, I mean, it is essentially caring for people and making a place for them, and being mindful of their preferences and their needs and their desires, and sometimes they need a cup of tea, and sometimes they need a 3-course meal and they don't know it.
Yeah. Well, I have since I've dipped around in your book, I've been thinking about this idea of does the performative have a place in true hospitality? And because there's again, Southern Living, Martha Stewart, you can read those things as a way of hospitality being a stage for performance.
Right.
Having said that, I think I'm not altogether opposed to there being a performative element even in true hospitality, to say I'm going to a lot of trouble because you're worth it and I care about you. And
Yeah.
I'm going to demonstrate that by going to a lot of trouble and making things beautiful.
Yes. And I really do try to make a case for that very thing in my book, because
Yeah.
it's something that, it can be a little bit of a sticky wicket in our world. And I've talked with so many women, in particular about this because, when you're offering hospitality on a lavish scale
Uh-huh.
for the reasons that you have just expressed, like it can, um, I don't want to use the word threatening, but it can make people kind of pull back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always wondering why. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that we have this idea in our culture, and maybe it's an American thing, that we feel like we have to reciprocate like on the
Uh-huh.
scale that we've received. And I think that's a real mistake, because I think it limits our ability to receive
Yeah.
goodness, and it limits our ability to, if expressing hospitality on that scale is our one of our creative outlets,
Mm-hmm.
and in God's image. I mean, I always think about George Herbert's poem, Love, that love bade me welcome, yet my soul
Yeah.
drew back, guilty of sin and fear. Like,
Yeah.
the protagonist in that poem feels his inability to reciprocate the kind of love that he's
Yeah.
shown. And, I remember my dad always talking about, like, God loves a cheerful giver, but he also loves a cheerful receiver.
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot to it.
Well, I've never read a book or looked at a painting or heard a song and said, okay, now that I've received that, I've got to write a book for that person or sing a song for that person or make a
Yeah.
painting for that person. I just say, I'm grateful for that person's creative effort that blessed me, and
Yeah.
that I'm in a position where all I can do is receive that. I got nothing to give back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really hard to think in those terms when it comes to hospitality.
It really is. And I think that's really sad.
Yeah. Well, and you used the word threatening. I mean, have you seen this new? I think it's new documentary about Martha Stewart. It's on Netflix.
I have not. I have
Yeah,
not. I
really
kind of don't want
interesting.
to.
Yeah, it's and it's a documentary designed to heighten anyone's sort of mixed feelings about
Uh-huh.
about Martha Stewart,
Uh-huh.
and I admire her more than ever, and then I also am more aware of her
Mhm.
faults than ever. But you remember what it was like when she was at the height of her powers,
Oh, yeah.
and the controversies around, is she somehow crushing the souls of women who can't make things as perfect as she makes
Mhm.
things, and I don't even know what I feel like that maybe I don't know if that's a question. That's a topic.
Yeah, it is a
But
topic.
there is in the offering of an elaborate act of hospitality, even quite apart from somebody feeling the need to reciprocate.
Mhm.
I guess there's also somehow a sense of, um, can you speak to the the possibility of crushing somebody just because they think
Mhm.
I can't compete with this?
Mhm.
And that, I think that verb compete is probably
Compete is a
important.
good, yeah. Well, I think that we have to be really careful. We have to start with ourselves. It's really easy to like look around and blame the influences of our culture on the, and I don't mean this in a harsh sense, but it's just, um, scripture makes it really clear that we're not to compare ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really at the root of a lot of the crushing weight of, the
Mhm.
expectations of our society. And so, in the gentlest way, I think we need to examine our own hearts and just make sure that we're not competing, and that
Mhm.
we're receiving what good is there for us, in these sources like Martha Stewart and, various things. Because, not only did she like, I mean, her her first book, the definitive tome, was entertaining. Like she's basically teaching people how to have people in their homes again, which was an art that had been lost in a generation. But she wasn't just doing that. She was teaching people how to care for their homes, and how to plant gardens and whatever. Like she made everybody backyard chicken raisers.
Right.
But I think it's important just to take the good and to be realistic about what our lives and our circumstances look like, and just really guard against anything that is making us feel like we need to compete. Because we have our sufficiency in Christ, and this is not to dismiss the challenges that you're talking about, but I just think it's really important to make it an outward expression of an inward reality.
Yeah. You have already alluded to the fact that hospitality is a primary means by which you express your creativity. But of course you have other creative endeavors, including this book. How does your understanding of hospitality, how has it shaped your other creative endeavors?
Yeah, I love that question. And I remember years ago sitting on the front porch of Northwood Manor before it was the current Northwood Manor. Sitting there
when
with
the vines were
Jennifer.
growing through the windows into the house.
But Jennifer and I were sitting there just, talking about our writing lives. And I said, I want my writing to be an act of hospitality. And, Jennifer, being Jennifer, was like, what do you mean by that? And I feel like I've been kind of teasing out what that means ever since. But part of that to me has meant, really inviting readers into the, not just the details of my life, but the major themes of my story, in a way that hopefully allows them to find some resonance in their circumstances that are, completely different from my circumstances. But, just kind of being generous with my stories and my, my walk with God and the things that he's shown me of himself. And, I always think about Buechner saying, the story of one of us is, in essence, the story of us all. And so really seeking to write in a way that is resonant. And, in the actual writing of this book, Pete, my editor and publisher, like he really had to poke on me to go some places that I was a little reluctant to go, in terms of some of my personal griefs and struggles. But, I realized that that's where people are going to find a friend, not in all the, parties and the recipes and all of that. And, that's adjunct to,
I find it really helpful to think in terms of, I've got a little space that's mine to cultivate. And as people pass through, I can, I can welcome them into this little space. I mean, I think in terms of, you think about the pilgrimage routes in, in Europe, or mostly Europe, each of those little places was a way station for the pilgrims passing through. And anybody's job in welcoming those people was just to welcome them into their little place. And they weren't responsible for the whole pilgrimage route. They're only responsible for their little spot. Maybe their village, but maybe smaller than that. Maybe just their little inn, or if they're responsible for the bridge, keeping the bridge maintained so that the pilgrims could pass through. And that aspect of hospitality, which, and again, those places were called hospitals, hostels, all that language that all gets mixed up, is all relevant to that language of the pilgrims passing through on the pilgrimage routes. And that's meant a lot to me, to realize that your job is just to tend to love the things that you love, and welcome people into those. And you've got a place there near Atlanta that's your place that you've cultivated and that you have not just cultivated, but you have inherited, from people who took care of it before you. The Rough House. Tell me about the Rough House.
Yeah. So the Rough House, it's spelled RUFF, although there are many times I'd like to spell it ROUGH.
Yeah.
But the Rough House is an old 1850s farmhouse home place on the northwest side of Atlanta, and it's a very special place. I can't help but feel that God has really, for whatever reason, had his hand on this place. There are a lot of reasons that it shouldn't still be here.
Uh-huh.
And it is. And yes, my husband actually grew up here. And so he has a lifetime of wonderful memories in this place. And when he and I got married, we actually went to his parents. At the time they had moved away. They'd moved to another suburb, and Philip was living here. He was renting it from his parents and subletting it to a rotation of roommates. So it was definitely a bachelor pad for about 8 or 10 years. That was definitely the ROUGH period.
Yeah, right.
But when Philip and I started dating, all of his roommates started looking for houses and apartments. And, but anyway, when we got engaged, we went to his parents and said, "Okay, we want to buy the Rough House. Like we want to live there. We want to make this our place." And his mother said, "Okay." And no one could love this place more than she did, because his parents restored it from, it was falling down. Like they, from the inside out, like wiring, plumbing, just everything. They just poured their hearts into it. And she said, "Nobody could love that house more than me. But do you see all these gray hairs on my head?" So that house came to me. And so she said, "I want you to live there a year. And then if you still want to, make it official, come back and we'll talk." And, a year later, we were like, "Yeah, we still want to live there." But the Rough House, it is a major character in my life, and it is a major character in my book. Mm-hmm. And I like to say that it's a motherly character in the sense that it has shaped me. It's been a shaping influence. And not only has it been a place of rest for us in the midst of, people don't even know we're back here, in the midst of, the Atlanta suburbs, like there's this rural pocket. And people say, "Oh, when I pull in the driveway, I just feel this sense of peace," but the discipline of its imperfections has also been a very, very loving force in my life. And I've really come to terms with that, because I'm a very idealistic person and I can always look at something and see the way it ought to be or the way I want it to be. Yeah. And the Rough House is constantly, showcasing my limitations, giving me wonderful opportunities to practice contentment, but also, just to really, it's been a canvas for me,
when you talk about the Rough House, makes me think about a garden, which, man, I would love to grow pomegranates, but you're just not going to grow pomegranates in Nashville, Tennessee. I have to live with the limitations of what I've got.
And I love that you said that, because, this house has really taught me what limitations mean, and that they are beautiful, that limitations are beautiful. Because when I first moved, it's a plantation plain, it's 4/4 center halls. It's a very plain, no nonsense farmhouse. And I'm a very flowery, romantic idealist. And when we moved in, or when I moved in, I wanted to change the name. I wanted it to be like, I love Anne of Green Gables and Emily of New Moon and all these. And I wanted it to be, Lanier of like, I don't know what. And the house was like, "No, what I am." And all the rooms are very square. And, I really had to sit with this house for a long time and just let it kind of reveal its identity to me before I started even trying to decorate it.
I love it. Well, and then you've got, you tend the grounds. You've got, I guess you have animals there.
We do, yes.
Yeah. So fun. Okay. By the way, we've barely talked about Jennifer Trafton's role in this story.
I know.
So tell me about Jennifer's role.
Yeah. So, not only is Jennifer one of my very, very dearest friends, she is an accomplished and successful author, also an accomplished and incredibly talented artist and illustrator. And Jennifer and I have been writing partners for years, and we kind of established our little Friday afternoon tea time over Zoom or FaceTime, whatever, that we would share our work and just kind of resonate with each other and kind of be a safe place to, catch each other's words when we needed a deadline. And so this book, was born in the context of that friendship and that practice that we already had in place. And neither one of us realized at the time when we had the idea for this book, because, I'd always wanted to write a Christmas book. I'd always had these thoughts, percolating, and the files on my computer, the things I would want to write about and the recipes I'd want to put in there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I said to her, "Hey, if I write this, would you illustrate it?" that it really came to life. Because without her, it would be nothing like it is. Like, she helped me bring it to a new level of just beauty and whimsy, and just even in her the ways that she's articulated some of the themes in the book in very subtle ways through the illustrations and the colors and the some of the little motifs that she assigns to each week. I mean, it's just been incredible, and it was so much fun. I mean, we just kept saying, "Is this right? Like, do we really get to do this? Like, this is..."
Yeah. I love that story, that this book that is about friendship in important ways grows out of a friendship.
Absolutely. And she truly helped me see the story arc. She really, really did. And I like to say that it was collaborative both ways, in the sense of I provided some photo references.
Yeah.
But, because she knows me and she spent so much time in my home, like, she really, really did capture the spirit of the Rough House and our Christmas celebration. So
yeah, that's great. All right, Lanier, I want to hear you talk about some writers, some writers who make you want to write. Who are the writers who make you want to write?
So the first one that comes to mind is Christy Purifoy. And I just love her so much. But I think that I know that Christy just nails the sacramental worldview that we've been talking about, that matters, that God is always communicating to us and wanting to, wanting us to integrate, the unseen realities into our seen lives. And Christy does that with elegance and simplicity in a way that is so disarming. She says the most profound things in the most elegant language.
Yeah.
And, whether she's writing about her home or her garden, and again, she's tending her space.
Yeah.
And whether people are gardeners or not, or whether they live in an old house or not, they can identify with the themes in her book. And so in her books. And so I love her for that. And then I would say probably the writer who has shaped me, had the most influence on me from my youth to present day, is Lucy Maud Montgomery. And she kindled my imagination. She brought characters into my life who became friends of mine. Anne of Green Gables came into my life when I was a very lonely, very imaginative, 11-year-old
Yeah.
and showed me that I was not alone.
Yeah.
And but her greatest gift, I think, was that she showed me the beauty of my own life, because I used to read her books and just ache with the beauty of her descriptions of Prince Edward Island and these, adventures that her heroines got into and the old farmhouses that they lived in and the communities. But I remember going to Prince Edward Island in my early 20s. We had a pilgrimage as a family. And, I was almost afraid, like the night before we, left. I guess we had to take a ferry back then, but the night before we left to go to Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia, I was almost afraid. Like, I don't know if I want to see it. I don't know if it's going to replace like what she gave me in my imagination.
Yeah.
And two things came out of that. It was all there. She served us well, but I came back to my own part of Georgia with new eyes for how beautiful it was and how much I loved it. And it just gave me a completely new perspective on.
Can you put that into, that's not self-evident what that means, because you go to Prince Edward Island, it doesn't look like your part of Georgia where you grew up.
It doesn't, no. But coming back, I saw my part of Georgia with new eyes, and I realized that it was her love for her place that gave it to the world. And the same was true of my love for my place. And there was every bit as much potential and beauty in my part of the world. I mean, no, I don't live in Prince Edward Island, but I love my pines. I love my humid sunsets and my hooty owls in the woods. And,
I love something Chesterton said. Men didn't love Rome because she was great. Rome became great because men loved her. And places need people to love them.
Yes. And that's the beauty. So.
Yeah. Well, Lanier Ivester, thanks so much for being here. It's always such a pleasure to talk. And,
my goodness. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I think a lot of people are going to benefit from your perspective on the holidays. And Christmas is not an emergency. Thanks for the reminder.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com. And to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.